Have you ever wondered what it would mean for three great faiths if a long-awaited sanctuary in Jerusalem were to stand again? Imagine a place that Muslims have called sacred since the Prophet's night journey, where Jews believe the divine presence once dwelt, and Christians see echoes of a promised future. What signs would show that such a building is near? Could passages in the Bible and the Quran hint at moments we might recognize today? In this journey, we will explore every clue offered by Scripture and Hadith, examine the insights of respected Jewish, Christian, and Muslim scholars, and trace how the promise of a third temple intersects with Islamic belief about Jerusalem. Long before our modern era, prophets spoke of a future sanctuary that would surpass all that had come before. The Hebrew Bible describes two temples that stood on the Temple Mount: Solomon's Temple, circa 957 BCE, c. 1 Kings 638, and the Second Temple completed in 516 BCE under Zerubbabel, Ezra 615. In 70 CE, the Romans destroyed the Second Temple, leaving the Jewish people without their formal center of worship and sacrifice. Yet embedded in Scripture are clear promises that a third temple would one day stand. Zechariah declared, "Behold, the man whose name is the branch, he shall build the temple of the Lord." Zechariah 6:12-13. Ezekiel gave meticulous measurements for a future house of worship, with courts, chambers, and rituals that would restore God's presence among his people. Ezekiel 40-48. Many Christians see these prophecies as pointing to a messianic age centered on Jesus, while traditional Jewish sources view them as literal instructions awaiting fulfillment. From an Islamic perspective, Jerusalem is equally important. The Prophet Muhammad's night journey, Al-Isra wal-Mi'raj, brought him to Al-Masjid al-Aqsa, the farthest mosque. Referred to in the Quran as "Blessed is he who took his servant Muhammad by night from Al-Masjid al-Haram to Al-Masjid al-Aqsa, whose surroundings we have blessed." Quran 17:1. Muslims see Al-Aqsa as the site where the Prophet led earlier prophets in prayer, and as the place to which Jesus, Isa, will return. As we explore the Third Temple, we must also consider how Islamic tradition frames Jerusalem's role in end-time events. Many scholars have dedicated lifetimes to answering when that Third Temple might be built. Hal Lindsey's The Late Great Planet Earth, 1970, linked biblical prophecy to contemporary events, sparking popular interest in the temple's future. John Hagee's Four Blood Moons, 2013, and Michael Rood's The Restoration of All Things, 2005, likewise suggested that modern developments in Israel could signal prophetic fulfillment. Jewish authors such as Rabbi Jonathan Cahn, The Harbinger, 2011, have proposed that events in America and Israel correspond to ancient patterns of warning and blessing tied to the temple's fate. From an Islamic angle, writers like Sheikh Imran N. Hossein in Jerusalem in the Last Days, 1994, connect Quranic and Hadith references such as reports of Jesus' descent near the White Minaret of Damascus to a broader eschatology involving Jerusalem and an eventual restoration of monotheistic worship on the Temple Mount. While some predictions have not come to pass, these works have kept the discussion alive across faith communities. To understand the prophecies, we first turn to the book of Ezekiel, written during the Babylonian exile, 597 BCE. In chapters 40 through 48, Ezekiel recounts a vision in which an angelic guide shows him a grand sanctuary on a high mountain, Ezekiel 40:02. He gives precise dimensions, a wall 6 cubits thick and 30 cubits high around an inner court, gates on every side and a massive altar at its center. Ezekiel 40:45-47. The most holy place is 25 cubits on each side. Ezekiel 41:4, symbolizing restored perfection. Ezekiel even outlines a schedule of offerings, priestly duties, and land allocations for the tribes of Israel. Ezekiel 45-48. Jewish sources such as Maimonides' Mishneh Torah 1170-1180 codify these laws, arguing that rebuilding a physical temple is a divine commandment. Hilchot Beit HaBechira 1:1. From an Islamic view, many early Muslim geographers and historians recognized that the site of Al-Masjid al-Aqsa overlapped with the ruins of the Jewish temples. The 14th century Ibn Battuta recorded that Jerusalem's Muslims believed in a future day of judgment event connected to the site. The rock upon which the Prophet stood during Miraj is in the mosque, hidden by a small structure. Ibn Battuta, Travel Sketches. Imam Ibn Kathir's Tafsir, 14th century, explains that the night journey, Isra, not only honored earlier prophets but also established Jerusalem's enduring holiness. While Ezekiel's blueprint cannot easily be overlaid on the present Temple Mount, given Herodian expansions and later Islamic structures, it remains a spiritual and legal guide for many Jews. Perhaps the most compelling detail in Ezekiel's prophecy is the re-establishment of sacrificial worship. He describes 12 priests from the line of Zadok with a monthly cycle of offerings. Ezekiel 43:19-27, 45:18-25. The prophet envisions a purified, unified Israel centered on worship at the new temple. Some scholars, like Walter Zimmerli in Ezekiel, a commentary 1979, view these details as symbolic of spiritual renewal rather than a literal building plan. Others, such as Orthodox Jewish theologian Aryeh Kaplan in The Living Torah, 1981, insist on literal fulfillment. The rebuilding of the temple is not merely a poetic vision, it is a physical commandment awaiting redemption. Islamic tradition does not depict Ezekiel's temple in identical terms, but Hadith literature mentions the restoration of true monotheism before the Day of Judgment. In Sahih Muslim, Hadith 2932a, the Prophet Muhammad warned that the Dajjal, Antichrist, would emerge near a land whose spring flows sweet, which some commentators associate with Palestine. Later hadiths, recorded in Sunan Abu Dawud, Hadith 4320, state that Jesus will descend at the white minaret of the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus, then join the Mahdi in Jerusalem to vanquish the Dajjal near Bait al-Maqdis, al-Masjid al-Aqsa. This suggests that a purified place of worship in Jerusalem, a Muslim-accessible Al-Aqsa, and the ruins of the Jewish temples will play a role in end-time events. Turning to the book of Daniel, we find a prophecy that many believe points directly to a future temple. In Daniel 9:25-26, the angel Gabriel tells Daniel that from the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the coming of an anointed one, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. Evangelical interpreters often divide this into 3 segments: 7 weeks, 49 years, 62 weeks, 434 years, and a final week of 7 years. In the middle of that final week, a prince who is to come will break a covenant and put a stop to sacrifice. Daniel 9:27. Many see this as a reference to the Antichrist desecrating a rebuilt Jewish temple. Tremper Longman III in Daniel, New American Commentary 2002, notes that The terminus of these prophecies implies a restored house of worship before the end-time conflict. Jewish historians like Solomon Zeitlin in Second Temple Judaism, 1972, argue that Daniel's 70 weeks concluded in the 1st century, pointing to the ministry of Jesus and the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE. From an Islamic perspective, some modern authors, such as Sheikh Imran Hossein in Jerusalem in the Last Days, 1994, interpret Daniel's putting an end to sacrifice as parallel to the Dajjal's attempt to force humanity into false worship. While the Quran does not record Daniel's writings, Hadith do warn that the Dajjal will attempt to claim divinity at Bayt al-Maqdis, requiring Jesus and the Mahdi to confront him. Thus, whether one reads Daniel literally or symbolically, there is an overlapping theme. A false claimant will desecrate a holy place only to be defeated by divine intervention. The book of Zechariah adds further layers. Zechariah 6:12-13 says, "Behold, the man whose name is the branch, he shall build the temple of the Lord, and he shall bear royal honor." Christian interpreters see this branch as the Messiah. Zechariah 4:6-7 describes a crowning stone with 7 eyes and horns, signifying complete divine power. Zechariah 8:3 promises, "I will return to Zion and dwell in the midst of Jerusalem." For Jews, these words sustain hope for a rebuilt temple, while Muslims hold that God's return to Jerusalem also includes his guidance through the prophet's example and the eventual rule of Isa, Jesus, and the Mahdi. In Mishkat al-Masabih, Hadith 1671, Imam al-Tabarani records a tradition that when the Muslim community corrects its ways, God will gather for them in Mecca and Medina, then allow them to stand with Jesus at Bayt al-Maqdis. That promise aligns with Zechariah's vision of divine presence, but frames it within Islamic monotheism. Beyond scripture, rabbinic sources speak directly to the expectation of a third temple. The Talmud, Sanhedrin 97a, teaches that Elijah the prophet will herald the Messiah and facilitate temple reconstruction. Nachmanides, Ramban, in his 13th century commentary on the Torah, insisted that rebuilding the temple and resuming sacrifices are central to redemption. In modern times, Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz helped revive a Sanhedrin movement to oversee temple-related rites, and the Temple Institute in Jerusalem has crafted priestly garments, ritual vessels, and Torah scrolls ready for use. The Institute's website documents each artifact with source citations from the Mishnah, Yoma 1:1-3, and Talmud, Yoma 4b-5a. Archaeologist Leon Rittmeyer's The Quest, Revealing the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, 2013, reconstructs Herod's temple platform, showing how a future structure could conform to ancient specifications without disturbing existing Islamic foundations. In Islamic tradition, Al-Masjid al-Aqsa occupies that same sacred plateau. After conquering Jerusalem in 637 CE, Caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab visited the ruins of the Jewish temples and ordered that the site remain unmolested, establishing early Muslim respect for the location. Ibn Ishaq, Sirat Rasul Allah, circa 767. The Umayyad Caliph Abd al-Malik built the Dome of the Rock, 691 to 692 CE, around the foundation stone, and his son Al-Walid completed Al-Aqsa Mosque, 705 CE. Islamic heritage scholars such as Al-Tabari, Tariq al-Rusul wal-Muluk, circa 915, and Al-Mas'udi. The Meadows of Gold 10th century record that Muslims believed in a future role for Jerusalem on Judgment Day. Hadith in Sahih Muslim, Hadith 2932. Warn, the Dajjal will appear in the east and travel west and will come to Jerusalem. People will flee to the mountain of Galilee, but Jesus will descend to the white minaret in Damascus, then go to Jerusalem and pray behind the Mahdi. Thus, for Muslims, a purified place of worship at Bait al-Maqdis, a site that respects both Islamic and Jewish traditions, will be central to end-time events. Political and religious realities today pose enormous challenges for any attempt to rebuild a Jewish temple or alter al-Masjid al-Aqsa. Since the Six-Day War, 1967, Israel has maintained security control over the Temple Mount, but left the Islamic Waqf in administrative charge. The status quo arrangement prohibits non-Muslim prayer at the site. Bernard Lewis in the Middle East, A Brief History of the Last 2,000 Years, 1995, warns that to tamper with the status quo would likely ignite interreligious warfare. In 1990, a Jewish activist group, the Temple Mount Faithful, conducted a symbolic sacrifice of the Paschal Lamb near the Western Wall, only to be halted by Israeli authorities. Rittmeyer 2013. In 2000, another group, the Committee for the Temple Mount, performed a ram's horn, shofar, ceremony near the Old City, prompting international headlines. Many Muslim leaders, meanwhile, see any Jewish attempt to rebuild a temple as an existential threat to al-Masjid al-Aqsa. Sheikh Youssef al-Qaradawi, in Fiqh al-Jihad, 2009, argued that defending Jerusalem is a religious obligation for all Muslims, citing Quran 2:191 and numerous hadith. Today's Hamas charter refers to Bait al-Maqdis as pure Islamic land that must be defended by jihad. Hamas Charter 1988. This tension underscores how deeply intertwined the Third Temple question is with broader Israeli-Palestinian conflict and Islamic solidarity with Jerusalem. Despite these obstacles, many signs and world events keep the discussion alive. In recent decades, some fringe Jewish activists have attempted symbolic sacrifices on the Mount. Temple organizations have prepared priestly garments and vessels in anticipation of any political shift permitting temple rebuilding. In 2015, the Temple Mount Heritage Foundation, led by Rabbi Chaim Richman, unveiled a scale model of Solomon's Temple at the Davidson Center, aiming to educate Jews and non-Jews about temple significance. Meanwhile, Israeli Knesset committees have debated granting limited prayer rights for non-Muslims on the Mount, but broad opposition, both domestic and international, has prevented any change. The European Union, United Nations, and Muslim-majority states regularly reaffirm that Israel must respect the special religious and political significance of Jerusalem's holy sites. UNSC Resolution 478/1980, UNESCO Resolutions 21/15 2017. Christian groups, especially evangelical Christians, watch closely. They see a rebuilt Jewish temple as a sign of end-time prophecy. Mason Horn, in The Temple and the Church's Mission, 2004, writes, "The temple points beyond itself to the coming one, and his dwelling among his people." For many evangelicals, events in Israel, such as the re-establishment of the Sanhedrin movement, signal that the final chapter in God's redemptive plan is near. Yet liberal Christian theologians, like those contributing to the Journal of Biblical Literature, argue that Jesus fulfilled temple symbolism. "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up," John 2:19-21, interpreted as his body, means that a literal third temple is unnecessary. From an Islamic viewpoint, however, any new temple that does not acknowledge Muhammad's prophecy and monotheism would be incomplete. As Sheikh Imran Hossein explains in Jerusalem in the Last Days, 1994, Muslims believe that the final house of worship in Jerusalem must honor all prophets, culminating in the return of Jesus under Islamic guidance. Historical experience shows that both previous temples shaped Jewish identity and worship. The first temple stood for roughly 4 centuries, the second temple for about 6 centuries. When the Romans destroyed the second temple in 70 CE, the Jews transitioned to Rabbinic Judaism, focusing on Torah study and synagogue worship. Martin Goodman, Judaism, A History, 2014. From an Islamic perspective, the Prophet Muhammad's night journey circa 621 CE established the precedence that divine presence is not confined to a building but travels with God's messenger. That journey took place at the site of the ruined temple, affirming to early Muslims that the holiness of Bayt al-Maqdis transcended any single structure. Later, the Umayyad caliphs built the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque to honor that divine presence. Islamic scholars such as Al-Qurtubi, Tafsir al-Qurtubi, 13th century, and Ibn Kathir, Tafsir Ibn Kathir, 14th century, both emphasize that the night journey revealed Jerusalem's unique status as the first Qibla, direction of prayer for Muslims even before Mecca. As we consider Ezekiel's vision and Daniel's 70 weeks, we must also remember Zechariah's promise that God will return to Zion and dwell in the midst of Jerusalem. Zechariah 8:3. Jews interpret that vow as referring to a third temple. Muslims see it as the promise that Allah's guidance will continue through Muhammad's example, and that Isa and the Mahdi will establish a reign of justice from Jerusalem. In Misbah al-Quds fi al-Fitan, The Lantern of Jerusalem in Tribulations, a modern Arabic tract, author Sheikh Muhammad Sharour writes that eschatological visions in Islam require believers to maintain peace around Jerusalem, avoiding actions that could spark conflict. He contends that true restoration, whether of a Jewish temple or a broader spiritual renewal, must come through mutual recognition of each faith's prophetic heritage. The Book of Revelation adds another layer for Christians. Revelation 11:1-2 describes John measuring the temple of God and the altar, with the outer court given over to the Gentiles for 42 months. Futurist interpreters often read this as a literal third temple measured by an angel, then desecrated before Christ's return. G.K. Beale in Revelation, a shorter commentary, 1999, argues that John's vision builds on Ezekiel's temple, blending Jewish hope with Christian expectation. The Apostle Paul in 2 Thessalonians 2:4 warns that the man of lawlessness will take his seat in the temple of God, proclaiming himself to be God. From an Islamic angle, though the Quran and Hadith do not mention a Christian apocalypse temple, they do warn that Dajjal will demand worship at Bayt al-Maqdis, only to be defeated by Jesus, indicating that captivity of a holy place and eventual deliverance are central motifs across all three faiths as we approach the present. Modern geopolitics cannot be ignored. The modern state of Israel, established 1948, and its 1967 capture of East Jerusalem, revived Jewish hopes of reclaiming Bayt al-Maqdis. Since then, archaeological digs by Israeli institutions, e.g. the Temple Mount Sifting Project, begun 2004, have uncovered thousands of Second Temple-era artifacts, confirming Talmudic descriptions of temple operations, Yoma 5:1. Gabriel Barkay's The Temple Mount Excavations, 1992, details discoveries such as ritual baths, mikva'ot, and coins inscribed with "To the Redemption of Zion," 2 Maccabees 12:42. Some evangelical Christians view these discoveries as green lights for Prophecies' next stage. James and Lois Hutchings in Countdown to the Messiah, 2002, write that every archaeological find near the Temple Mount is a sign that the Third Temple is imminent. From an Islamic standpoint, however, digging under al-Masjid al-Aqsa raises fears about destabilizing the foundations of the Dome of the Rock and al-Aqsa Mosque. Eric H.C. Gordon, in Jerusalem and the Holy Land Surveyed, 2016, cautions that any major excavation risks collapsing centuries-old structures. UNESCO resolutions, e.g. 21 COM 10.12 2017, have criticized Israeli heritage projects as threats to Muslim heritage, intensifying tensions around any temple-related activity. Theological shifts also shape popular expectations. In recent years, dispensational premillennialism has surged among evangelical Christians, leading to books and conferences focused on a rebuilt temple. Elmer Towns and Mark Strauss, in The Unfolding Drama of the Ages, 2012, outline a 5-act end-time drama culminating in a Jewish temple as a stage for the final showdown with evil. Podcasts and YouTube channels now interview rabbis, theologians, and rabbis advocating temple reconstruction, debating whether this generation will see the stones laid again. In contrast, Jewish scholars at institutions like Hebrew Union College, Reform Judaism, and the Jewish Theological Seminary, Conservative Judaism, generally view rebuilding as a post-messianic event beyond human initiative. Orthodox theologian Rabbi Norman Lamb, in The Religious Thought of Hasidism, 2008, urges moral and spiritual readiness before any physical rebuilding, stressing that external stones are nothing without internal humility. Muslim scholars echo this theme. True restoration requires spiritual renewal. Ibn Kathir in Tafsir Ibn Kathir, 14th century, teaches that the holiness of al-Masjid al-Aqsa and the Temple Mount is not confined to bricks and mortar but flows from faithfulness to God's guidance. Modern Islamic thinkers like Sheikh Mohammed Sayyid Tantawi, Tafsir al-Mishkat al-Masabi, 2000, emphasize that if Muslims seek a future of peace in Jerusalem, they must cultivate justice, compassion, and knowledge. In writings like The Fall of the Ottomans, The Great War in the Middle East, Oliver Begin, 2012, historians note that the collapse of Ottoman rule in 1917 opened the door for British and French mandates, setting the stage for future conflict over Temple Mount and Al-Aqsa. Yet even amid political upheaval, millions of Muslims recite prayers emphasizing the need for unity and peace. Our Lord, grant us mercy from yourself and guide us to the right path. Quran 3:8. Practical steps toward any new building remain fraught. Proposals to construct a Jewish temple off-mount have arisen, either on the mount's slopes or at a nearby site designed to preserve current Islamic structures. Leon Rittmeyer's reconstructions, The Quest 2013, show how Herodian expansions might be restored, but Islamic authorities object to any design altering the existing Dome of the Rock or Al-Aqsa Mosque. In 2017, UNESCO passed Resolution A/RES/71/14, reaffirming that Jerusalem's Old City is a cultural heritage site with outstanding universal value to both Muslims and Jews, urging respect for its multi-religious history. Sheikh Yusuf Qaradawi, in The Lawful and Prohibited in Islam, 1999, argued that Muslims must defend Al-Aqsa as a part of their faith, citing hadith that state, "Whoever prays at this mosque will have a reward equivalent to a pilgrimage." Sahih al-Bukhari Hadith 1611. Yet amid all these tensions, the longing for a place of pure worship endures in each tradition. On Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, Jews recite prayers lamenting the temple's absence. Restore our judges as of old and our counselors as at the beginning. Remove from us sorrow and sighing and reign over us, O Lord, forever. Isaiah 1:26. Muslims around the world prostrate toward Mecca 5 times daily, but during special nights, Laylat al-Miraj, they remember that Jerusalem was once the first Qibla and will remain at the heart of faith. In the Hadith compiled by Imam al-Tirmidhi, Hadith 3170, the Prophet said, "Do not set out for the prayer of Fajr except in congregation, for it is like the gathering under the al-sacred sanctuary." Even today, many scholars interpret sacred sanctuary as a reference to Jerusalem's status. Christians affirm their bond to Bayt al-Maqdis by recalling Jesus' temple teachings. "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." John 2:19-21. They see in those words a promise of resurrection rather than bricks, which brings us to the closing reflection. Could a third temple, or its spiritual equivalent, rise in our lifetime? Biblical and Quranic prophecies assure us that Jerusalem remains central to God's purpose. Ezekiel's detailed vision, Daniel's 70 weeks, Zechariah's promises, and the New Testament's end-time warnings all point toward a renewed place of worship. Meanwhile, Islamic tradition teaches that Isa and the Mahdi will establish justice from Jerusalem, purify the faithful, and defeat falsehood in Al-Masjid al-Aqsa. We see the regathering of Israel, Isaiah 11:11-12, Ezekiel 36:24-36. The revival of Hebrew, a sign of cultural restoration, and the blossoming of the land, Isaiah 35:1. Muslims witness continued reverence for Al-Aqsa, a sign that God's presence has never truly departed. Yet the political reality remains fragile. No authority today supports rebuilding a Jewish temple on the Mount, and no Muslim leadership will allow any plan that conflicts with sanctity of Al-Aqsa. Prophetic timelines differ. Preterists see most prophecies fulfilled by 70 CE. Historicists see them unfolding through successive eras. Futurists await a final 7-year tribulation, Daniel 9:27, Revelation 11. Islamic eschatologists await Dajjal's emergence and Isa's descent. All agree, however, that divine timing transcends human scheduling. Arnold Fruchtenbaum, in Israelology, 1993, writes, "The prophetic clock is God's domain. Even as we study the signs, we trust that the moment will arrive at the perfect juncture of divine providence." So what does this mean for our world today? If a third temple were built exactly as Ezekiel described, it would require a fundamental shift in regional politics and interfaith relations. Islamic tradition teaches that a purified Bayt al-Maqdis will welcome Isa and the Mahdi, leading to a global era of justice. Christian futurists see a Jewish temple as the setting for end-time conflict. Many Jews pray daily for rebuilding, believing that the Messiah's coming hinges on restoring the temple's worship. Yet even if no new stones are laid, the real question is whether hearts in all 3 faiths can prepare for the deeper meaning of God's enduring presence. In these final lines, imagine walking up to the Eastern Gate in Jerusalem at dawn. See the smooth stones of the ancient wall. Recall the echoes of priests calling out, Kadosh, 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 Isaiah 6:3. And remember that the same rock witnessed Muhammad's night journey, Quran 17:1. Jesus' teaching, Mark 11:15, and Solomon's prayer, 2 Chronicles 6:41, feel the centuries of yearning for a house of worship that unites faith, hope, and love. The third temple, or the ultimate spiritual reality it symbolizes, may not come at the moment we expect. Yet its true promise transcends stone and mortar, a dwelling place for every heart that seeks peace, justice, and divine mercy.